Welcome back to Pastor Plek's podcast. So glad all of you are joining us as we're recording live from Austin, Texas. And in studio with me today is the one and only Pastor James Foster, who has a spiritual gift of good looks.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much.
And apparently acting.
Acting. He is an actor.
Couple of extras, yeah.
You know,
featured.
And if you may not know this, he is the future church plant pastor of a church to come near you if you live in the Taylor vicinity.
That's right.
Are you very
Pretty excited about it.
Yeah. Very
I
excited.
thought we were brainstorming names for your future church today.
Ooh. Most likely,
James Taylor Church.
Taylor Bible. Taylor Bible Church.
Oh, wow. That's original.
Yeah.
I was
Very
hoping
original.
for like
OG.
Enlightened Church or Door Church
Ooh.
or
Just take the church right out of the name.
Mhm.
Just make it really mysterious.
Just
Yeah.
be like,
The door.
or a door.
Have you ever
Ooh,
seen those
yikes.
John Christ? He does a series
I
on
love that.
pot dispensary or church.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so hilarious.
And you have to, like-
it's really hard.
It's very hard. I think you need to like
Yeah,
name
go-
yours.
Yeah, give it like the dispensary. And just dispensing
With
Jesus.
like a nice leaf,
dispensing
leaf cross.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, and also in studio with us again is Mrs. Leah Brown. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
All right. That's a delayed welcome, but that's okay. Hey, listen, this past Sunday, we've been going through the Gospel of Mark, and I've really enjoyed, it's like my favorite thing going through the Gospels. And what we talked about is fear over faith. There's a tendency for us to respond to situations that circumstance, life gives us with fear over faith. And the three reasons that I sort of brought up is we are afraid because we don't think that God cares. Like he is out there somewhere doing his own thing and he doesn't have time for us. Or maybe we respond in fear over faith because he might ask us to change. And, you know, we want God to accept us the way we are, but never ask us to change at all, which is, I think that's probably normal. We kind of get frustrated when our spouses ask us to change as well. So I can see why we get frustrated with God. And then finally, maybe we are afraid to get near to God because he might send us somewhere where we don't want to go. And so I feel like whenever we talk about proximity to Jesus, there's really some great things transformatively that are going to happen to us. But I feel like you can wrap your head around that where maybe Jesus won't care. And so what we talked about is that Jesus literally sent the disciples into a storm in Mark 4, starting at verse 35, and he took a nap so that they would have the experience of having to trust Jesus. And at one point, they cry out to him in the middle of the store because they all thought they were going to die. It's like, Jesus, don't you care? And I think we've all been there at a don't you care moment. We're all going to die. And then Jesus rebukes the wind. And he looks at the disciples after and says, like, why were you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? And I appreciate that. But the reality was that Jesus does care. And he can stop the storms of our life in a word.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next thing that happened is that Jesus, you know, he gets the other side of the Sea of Galilee, comes up upon the Hulk, who's a demon-possessed man who can break chains with his bare hands. And then he casts a demon out of this guy and then sends it into these pigs. And then everyone freaks out and asks him to leave. Like, it's like this moment of like, you just killed off our 2,000 pig economy and you healed the crazy person that was in the tombs. Please leave. And they're afraid of the change that Jesus would bring, which I think this is probably something I think more Christians can identify with than more than anything. We don't want to get too close to Jesus because he might ask us to change something, and we like our life. I do me, you do you. Let's show up, shut up, pay up. Let's live our lives and never have to encounter or talk about the sin in our lives, all that. And finally, send us somewhere where we don't want to go. Jesus, I love this. The man that had been healed of demons does the one thing that Jesus is trying to get everyone else to do. He begs Jesus just to be with him. And Jesus says no, which I love this because I feel like when you understand that Jesus is all you need and all you want is to be with him, that's when he sends you off. Remember when Mary is clinging to Jesus after his resurrection? He's like, nah, go and tell the disciples that I've risen. When he's with the disciples locked in the upper room, and everyone's like, this is awesome. And then he says, hey, just as God sent me, so I'm sending you. And you're like, okay. and he sent them to do very hard things. And what this Hulk guy had to go do was go talk to the very people he probably had traumatized at some point and share what Jesus had done for him. And he went and he did it. And so I feel like that's where I want to start. Do you guys have any thoughts on those specific, can I use a fun seminary word, pericopes?
Yeah, never heard that before.
Or if it's kind of more spelled pericope, but pericope is another word for the small section stories of the Gospels or any really story. So any thoughts on any of those? Pastor James, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I love the first story where the disciples cry out, "Do you not care that we're perishing?"
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I think that's the classic response in terrifying situations that we're like, God, where are you? What, do you not even care?
Right. Yeah. Leah, have you ever cried out to God, why me? Don't you care? You ever had one of those moments?
I don't think I can say that I have, actually.
You've never said, don't you care?
No.
Wow. I totally have.
Gift of faith?
Yeah, gift of faith.
I do think that I have a gift of faith, nothing that I have earned or anything like that.
It's a gift, yeah.
It just is a faith that hasn't wavered.
So when I was single, and I shared this yesterday, I was like, this happens, especially in your 20s. You just think you're going to be single for forever because that's what happens when you're in your 20s. And I remember yelling out one day, don't you care, God? Like, I was super frustrated and didn't get married till 10 years later. But that was another, apparently. And what I learned from that is I had a lot to learn. I think in the moments of our, when circumstances are overwhelming, God is trying to teach us something. And James 1:5 says, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask of God who gives generously to all without finding fault. Well, there's the other part of that verse, which is 6-8. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt. For he who doubts like a wave of the sea blown tossed by the wind. That man should not think he receive anything from the Lord. He's a double-minded man, unstable in all he does. And I love it that they use the wind and wave analogy, because that's exactly what the disciples were going through. And so I feel like in the moment of struggle, and so if you're out there and you're a person that's going like, no, you don't understand, like there's this thing and I've been waiting and God, I don't think he actually cares. That's crazy talk, because he cares for you. Psalm 55:22, cast your cares upon the Lord and he will restrain you, because he cares for you. I think there's a true reality that he cares for you. And I think if you can get your head around that, it will help you be fully aware of God's love for you. I had a question come in. This really gets into our second one of the people were afraid of the change that Jesus brought. And I think, Leah, you'll be able to, this one you might be able to help out, not maybe from your own perspective, but you've had a lot of experience with people in this particular realm. When you've tried to be there for people you care about, who are in those toxic relationships. So I mentioned that the reason why a lot of you don't want to get too close to Jesus, they're going to tell you to get out of a relationship that you're in, especially dating people. And you're like, you've been sleeping with the person and it's not working out, but then you're emotionally attached to them and you can't break free and they're not making you more Christ-like, all that. They're aware of it and it affects them. After years of trying to bring them to change, at what point can you walk away from it? Not end the relationship with a friend altogether, but step away and hope they find their own way. Have you ever had this experience, Leah?
A million times over, but I think that there's something in this question that I want to address. When you have a friend and you love a friend and you try to give them advice, like, are you giving them advice for you or for them?
Nice.
Because if it's for them, then you're not just going to walk away because they didn't listen to your advice, right? But if it's for you, you're going to walk away because, well, they're not listening to me,
right.
me. Like, they obviously don't know that I have all the good advice and that I'm trying to help them and they're not listening. So what more can I do? Like, what's your motive there? Does that make sense?
But let me defend this person, because I don't know who wrote this.
No, I don't either.
Let me defend this person for a second. What it sounds like they're saying is that they've tried that, and the person actually acknowledges, hey, wait, yeah, thank you. I know, I shouldn't be with this person. But then they get stuck. And they're like, at what point do you stop beating the drum and you go, this is your own choice?
I don't think, if the drum is the truth that's found in Scripture, then I don't think you ever stop beating it. I don't. Why tire of pointing people back to truth and to Scripture? I mean, yeah, maybe it's exhausting, but I would never quit, because God's going to unveil their eyes when he's ready if you keep pointing them to the truth.
Wow.
Now, in our today's culture, it's really popular to put up boundaries, right?
Right.
We've talked about that too,
Yeah.
but I think boundaries can be exploited to be selfishness.
Okay.
And so you want to be careful that that's not your motive. It's not a selfish motive. Now, because in this question example specifically, they didn't really talk about necessarily any like unhealthy.
Mhm.
The toxic relationship is maybe between the person you're helping and their boyfriend
Right,
or their
right,
girlfriend.
right,
it's
whatever,
not the toxic relationship between you and the
Them,
friend.
Right.
So maybe we would talk a little bit differently if that were the case. But based on the way the questions frame, I don't see any reason to, if like I said, if you're pointing them to truth, I would never stop pointing people to truth. Now, look, I feel like these are the
Hardcore.
people God gives me in my
Yeah.
life. That's why I'm saying this.
Okay.
Like apparently I don't know how to share the gospel with people because God seems to give me these people that I love on and pour into for a decade, right? And they're hard people, and in my heart is just to, like I said, continue pointing them to truth. And then I hear that apparently James Foster's the only person who ever shared the gospel with this person that I've been picking up from 6th Street at 3 a.m. in the morning for years.
He does have the spiritual gift of good looks.
He
and so
does.
therefore, that might be the only way you
just-
can hear it.
No, but no. All jokes aside, that's my perspective on it.
Okay, fair. Let's hear from Pastor James. So, talk to me about this. Like when you've tried to be there for people you care about who are in toxic relationships and they're aware of it and it affects them. When are you allowed to walk away from? And I think what they mean is not in the friendship altogether, but step away and hope they find their own way in that particular relationship.
Yeah. So this is where I think it'd be easy to jump in with like some sarcasm, like, "Oh, you're having relationship trouble again." Imagine that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But trying to avoid the complete making a mockery of their relationship, right?
Nobody would ever do that.
That would just be bad advice. Bad advice
idea,
from
bad
Pastor
idea,
James.
jeans. Yeah,
That could be a new bit we do.
Well, that would be a good bit. Yeah.
Bad counsel from Pastor James.
Bad counseling
You know,
There you
bits.
go.
when someone brings up to you a really hard relationship, just make fun of them to their face.
Yeah, there you
Mock
go.
them openly.
Oh,
Well,
man.
But why would you end the relationship with a friend altogether just because they're not listening to your advice?
Yeah, I don't think,
Right.
and I don't think that's what they're saying.
That's
here.
not what they want to do.
Right. And I think they're saying don't end the relationship, but just not bring this up anymore and not
Right.
bring up the crazy relationship. And, because I do feel like there are people that date for 7-8 years. I mean, that's like, we live in a world that's common.
Yeah.
And you're watching them do the same thing over and over again, like on rotation. It's like, what is it? Was it spring again? Oh, they're really excited about each other now. Middle of summer. Oh, it's getting hard. Fall, new starts, new things. Winter. Oh gosh, they're having to go see family. It's a disaster.
No, I'm not saying be the nagging friend.
Right.
Like, don't continually bring up their flaws and their shortcomings to them. But when they come to you, continue to be a sounding board for truth.
Yeah, and I agree with that. So here's the way I look at this is at some point when your advice is not heeded, don't waste your pearl among swine. So if this is a friend and they're coming to you, then give it to them. And if they're able to heed it, then you want to give it to them in the measure which they can hear. And so I think as a friend, it sounds like you've been there for a long time with this person. And so you know what measure of advice they can heed. And eventually and this is where I feel like the advice goes. You don't want to demonize the other person they're dating or they're in a toxic relationship with, because they're probably going to be in a relationship with that person for a long time. And so what happens when you do demonize that person, you've become an unsafe person for them to have a relationship with. And you almost feel like that other person, the person they're in a toxic relationship will almost demonize you and sort of ban the relationship. And so what I find happens is you say, hey, what kind of behaviors are you looking for? And is that what you're getting? And then when they say, well, I'm not getting that, then you, at some point you go,
That's interesting.
that is interesting. I hear what you're saying. Because at that point, they're not going to, when you say break it off, they're going to be like, nah, I'm good. So you want to be careful about that, because what I've done this is the classic bad advice I gave Leah 12 years ago. Was I told you to tell that one couple to break it off, and then they like cut off their friendship with you and
Uninvited me to their wedding.
Yeah, I feel bad. I still feel bad about that to this day.
Well,
I should.
they were some really good friends. And
How are they doing now?
they're still married.
Hey, way to
Hey.
go. Listen, the Lord overcame. So I learned my lesson back then that people will probably end up, not probably, there's a good chance they could end up with that person. So you don't want to bash that person. You don't want to take down a too direct way if you're wanting to maintain relationship with that person.
Well, and that's why my go-to is not just tell you what I think when people come to me. My go-to is, what does scripture say? And also try to act as a mirror to the person. Like, what do you think? Help them come up with their words on their own. And I think I've found that to be a lot more effective at changing hearts.
They're going to own their decision if they make it themselves or they feel like they've made it themselves. And so helping them come to that conclusion without forcing that. I mean, in that case that you just shared with, hey, you guys should break up. Maybe you united them together even closer against you.
I did.
But they came together in a special way.
They needed you in that moment.
They needed an antagonist
they needed
in their story.
Yep. You'll get a thank you card one day.
Yeah, you will. It's like, thank you for being that person that we could unite against to hate for the rest of our lives. All right. So let's talk about, though, why are people, and this is a general, not a specific question. Why are people averse to Jesus changing them?
Control.
Yeah.
Control, the idol of control. We want to be in control. We don't want to yield to something greater, and change is scary.
Yeah.
Comfort.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Control, comfort. What I think about this, I think of an addict who they'll only let Jesus change them when they're like, I cannot change myself. I need to go to inpatient therapy or whatever. And I feel like the church is sort of like an outpatient therapy, meaning like, hey, you need Jesus. And we are going to coach you, mentor you, develop you in how Jesus should be your ultimate thing. And you've placed ultimateness on this other person. This person is going to drag you down. Are you ready to take a big step for Jesus? And I think that people are ready for that, but there's always this hook because it isn't an inpatient therapy, it's outpatient. And so therefore the world is always calling them back to itself. And so trying to deal with the battle of the world and then battle of your soul is very difficult. And so there might be the desire for Jesus to change them, but when the world is calling you back all the time, it becomes very, very difficult. That's my thought on that. Okay.
Yeah. It's good.
Any other thought on that, Leo? Did you have you had a pause of looking like you were about to say something?
Yeah, I have some thoughts in my head swirling. I haven't been able to organize them well enough to say anything to add yet. So
okay, all right.
I'm going to hold them for now.
Right, and then so that last part is this also the sentness that I love that Jesus did with the demoniac guy. I love the fact that he sent him to his friends and family. Like that for him probably had to have been the scariest thing. Right, because of all the you're a failure, the no prophet except in his own hometown, and even Jesus said that. So for him to go back to his own hometown and friends and family and tell them what Jesus had done for them, it's sort of crazy. Now here's a happy fun fact. During the times of the Roman persecution, many Christians found sanctuary or safe haven in the Decapolis because Christians were protected there, hidden there, because they weren't of Jewish origin, and so no one thought that they would be persecuted. And so it's sort of an interesting deal. Sort of like read Roman history to kind of see how the Decapolis or that area became a place of safety for Christians during a time of persecution, which I thought. And so really maybe Jesus sent this guy ahead as the forerunner to all the people that would ultimately one day accept Christ and then receive Christians into their homes. So there's a fun fact there.
The man who made everybody afraid then gave everybody safety.
Boom. Nice.
And God was working out his plan, even though it might not have made any sense to anybody involved at the time.
No,
yeah, like
sure.
which friends would he go to, right? Who'd you cut that's going to come and
yeah. And like he tried to bind him with chains and it didn't go well. Like that guy took a chain to the head. I don't know.
That would be a true friend, though.
Yeah, that's a definitely
I've bound
true.
a friend with chains before. Yeah, it's really hard. Oh gosh, that could be interpreted a lot of ways.
Leah, do share about your chain binding.
I once put a friend in handcuffs and put her in the back of her own car and drove her to counseling.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was a bold move.
That is a bold move.
I'd say worth it in the end.
So where'd you get the handcuffs? You just kind of have those hanging around?
I think they were like a joke from We'll go with mafia.
There you go, mafia.
Or maybe a joke from a bachelorette party, probably.
There you go. Wow.
But
Okay, so yeah,
probably had some pink fuzzies on them.
but they worked.
They did work.
Oh, that was
There you
good.
go.
Well, when you put behind, like,
Yeah. How'd you get her hands wrenched behind her back and all that? You just put it on the ground?
I'm a lot bigger than she was.
Okay. All right. Way to
I'm
go.
bigger than a lot of people, so.
It works out for you. Use your size to your advantage.
This
there.
is my PSA for body positivity. Okay, keep going.
Okay, next question. If Jesus, and this is sort of to do with this, but not really, but came in during the sermon. So, of course, it was either the person was daydreaming and just came up with this, but let's just go with it. If Jesus has authority over all earth, how is Satan able to tempt him with giving him everything on earth? For example, it says, hey, I'll give you all the kingdoms of the earth. When fasting in the forest, maybe when fasting in the wilderness, this person may not know exactly where he was fasting. That's fine. Personally, if someone tempted me with something that was mine, I wouldn't even call it temptation, but just assume they were crazy. All right, this is a great question.
Is this story in Mark? It's only in Matthew, right?
Matthew and Luke. So I'm not sure why Matthew 4 and Luke 4 both are the same place. Okay. So go ahead.
Maybe they were reading Matthew 4 while you were teaching Mark 4. I think it's a great question.
Yeah, so. It is a great question. Yeah. It probably the Genesis may have been, they couldn't find it in the Bible and they got stuck on the chapter before Mark or thought they were in Mark when they were actually in Matthew. All right, so if Jesus has authority over all earth, how is Satan able to tempt him with giving him everything on earth? All right, so remember, Satan is the prince, the power of the air, has been given authority over the earth. Now, Jesus is even over authority over him, but he has given God, the Father, has given Satan authority over the earth. Why? That's a great question. But
didn't prepare for this one, did you,
no,
pastors?
No, but it's just one of those things where you sit there and get into the head of God on why he would allow evil ever to exist, and so
for his glory.
Yeah, for his glory. So watch this. Whenever a man who they were co-regents with God in the Garden of Eden, and when they obeyed the word of Satan over the word of God, they gave up their co-regency to Satan because they rule. Regency means rule. They gave up their rule to Satan, and so and has had rule ever since then. Okay, so that's how sin dominates the world, and that's why we're all affected by it, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so does God own it all? Yes, but there is a authority given, and Satan is willing to give it back, meaning salvation could happen for all of humanity without Jesus having to pay the price if he would give up the one thing that Satan doesn't have from God, which is worship. Mm-hmm. And that's what Satan, when he ascended to the throne, essentially, and his rebellion was, I want to be like God. I want to be worshipped. And so that's the commodity of heaven, if there is a commodity, is worship. And so the only one worthy of worship is God himself. And so for Satan to get that, even if it's for a moment, because remember, everything in heaven is eternal. So in that moment, that's an eternity in that one moment, and Satan could go kind of, I have the throne, I have the power, and you can have salvation for these fools. But it doesn't work like that. Also, it doesn't work like that because remember, our sins aren't being tallied up by Satan. It's not. There's no dualistic worldview. I was actually at an Ann Wilson concert on Saturday night. We actually went for David Crowder, but we couldn't stay late enough because our kids are too young to hang in there till like 10 something whenever David Crowder started. Anyway, but Ann Wilson, and a lot of her songs, which I actually love Ann Wilson, but a lot of her songs are about the devil, about how the battle of the devil, and it's like you almost create a dualism. It's like Jesus versus the devil, and Jesus and devil are gonna fight, and Jesus is gonna beat him. And it's not even like that. The devil is only doing what Jesus allows. Like he defeats evil with a word. There's no like, who's gonna win? It's Jesus wins every time. However, he has given him authority because of man gave it up. And so therefore, what he's the trade is worship me, and then I will give you, you can have the souls of these people, which really wasn't his to give anyway. So that's why in a sense, this person is smart in that, because the part that the temptation, right, it is just crazy. However, Jesus was fasting for 40 days and he's like, man, I want to get this fast over with. And but he's tempted in every way. So he's given ultimate power and authority in the human flesh. He's given, the ability to for approval of people by doing nosedives off the temple and being, carried down by angels. And he's able to make bread from stones to stop hunger. So there's lots of pieces there that I think the person's looking at.
Can we look at the second half of the question where he says, personally, if someone tempted me with something that was already mine, I wouldn't even call it a temptation. I would argue that that's what happens every day. Like Satan tempts us with things that are already ours.
Oh, nice.
It's just that he offers us those same things, but seemingly with less work, right? So he offers you like freedom, right? Like freedom from like the shackles of your job, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Or freedom from parenting your kids. He offers those things to you, like in a lot of ways, but ultimately you do have like a greater freedom that God offers you. It just takes a little bit more work.
This is so good. I actually had this epiphany at that concert. Somehow the story of the prodigal son came up and I started thinking about it. It wasn't actually the person talking, didn't even mention this, but my mind went there. So the boy that, or the kid that takes his dad's inheritance and spends it on wild living. I'm assuming it was parties. It was like trying to find his fill, get his fill of the world. Well, it's odd when he comes back, he's met with a party that's just for him, as opposed to going to a party that celebrates sin and darkness. Mm-hmm. And so he actually gets the bigger party when he comes back to his dad. And so the counterfeit that we're being offered is that. And I thought that was really kind of a unique perspective on it.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I think the question is kind of what it's begging is like the full nature of Jesus being fully man and fully God. So while he is fully God and these things are fully his, he's also fully man. And so like, yeah, when you're saying, hey, why don't you use your power to make these stones into bread? It's like, bread would actually be pretty great right now. Mm-hmm. I could grab a bite to eat, especially after fasting for such a long period of time. Bread's going to be sounding pretty good. And so just realizing, okay, Jesus is fully man, and that's why he's able to be tempted. He's also fully God, which is why he's able to withstand that temptation.
That's good. Okay, well, hey, listen, we're going to wrap it up today. And listen, if you've got questions about faith culture and everything in between, please text us at 737-231-0605, or you can go to pastorplek.com and leave your question there. We would love to get back with you, and it's an exciting thing to be a part of this podcast with you guys. So from our house to yours, have an awesome week of worship.